So obviously your names and company titles are up on the screen behind you, but it would be helpful to have a little brief introduction, who you are, where you come from, and kind of what your company's approach is to technology, be it third party or under-operated or kind of like hybrid of both. So Dan, let's kick off with you.
So I'm Infectious Media, I'm the Partnerships Director. We're actually 10 years old this year. Celebrating our 10th year. Yeah, thank you. Good clap there, thank you very much. But I guess we've been billing ourselves as a programmatic tech agency for quite a while now. So Programmatic's all we ever did. So 10 years ago they formed the company. 8.5 years ago they hired a CTO because they realised that we were going to need some tech to build some tech for this stuff. So we built some technology, and then we went the whole hog and actually built a DSP as well. So I think in terms of where we are on the scale of things, we've definitely gone down the whole, like, let's definitely have lots more tech than we do have agency. So hopefully you can give some insights as to how hard that's been and the benefits that we've also seen from it as well on the panel.
Great, thank you. Carol?
Great. Hi, I'm Carol. I'm with Digitas. I'm based in the States. I work out of Los Angeles. We're part of Publicis Media, and I would say, so I've been with Digitas 14 years, going on 15 soon. But our approach is more of a hybrid combo model. So while we do own our own tech, we also very much so leverage third-party platforms, and in some cases kind of customize that.
Thank you. Danny?
My name is Danny Hopwood. I'm President for Digital Display from here for Omnicom. Been at Omnicom just over 4 months now, and before that I was at Publicis. Omnicom largely using third-party technologies to deliver their programmatic media buying, but internally the kind of mantra that we have is that we build when the platforms don't give us what we need. So normally that's stitching things together, or combining data sets, or providing new views which DSP UIs don't give us.
Great. Gavin?
Hey, my name's Gavin, Digital Strategy Director at Jellyfish. Extensively worked brand side, worked with Danny when I was a client, and I basically bugged you asking you far too many questions.
Absolutely.
Which was kind of novel, being a brand asking questions and kind of poking under the hood. More recently, I'm now working at Jellyfish, where we very much use a Google technology stack, layering technology on top where appropriate, trying to help brands really understand what they actually want to deliver.
Great, thank you everyone. And the novelty of being the brand asking questions, obviously maybe it was novel back then, we'll probably get into the conversation later about how it's becoming less novel now. But I do want to find out from you, and I guess Dan, you're a great person to start with because you are what some people would term as the next generation agency, because you are an agency, but you also have the kind of very strong tech focus, and you have gone into the kind of you have gone and built your own bidder. What are the benefits to you, and what are the benefits that you are able to offer clients? How does that help with the conversations that you're able to have with them, and how does it help you as a business internally?
I guess there's reasons why we did it in the first place, and then there's obviously reasons that have kept, meaning that we've kept investing in it, I guess. The reasons we started in the first place was we built, the first tech that we built was log level integration into different DSPs to then do some analytics and reporting, which was great, and we built lots of lovely dashboards combining lots of programmatic data, which did as well. But then we realised that the actual traders in the actual DSPs didn't have the required controls that they needed for specific brands. We do work with a small number of large brands. We've never worked with agencies, so we have had very specific challenges to solve along the way, which I think has helped us and helped us back then. But the main reasons that we did for that was just extra control, transparency. Transparency still was obviously a big issue back then. That was 2011, 2012. Back then, DSPs thought we were crazy because they were like, "You're never going to be able to afford it. You don't have a third party." And then, a few years later, they were like, "Oh, look at all this fraud you've been buying." We were like, "Oh, we're quite glad we avoided that." So that's kind of the main reasons. And then there's a measurement aspect as well. So we're trying to build customized measurement models for advertisers. Back then, brands with specific challenges, and we needed bid data for that as well. So bid data is extremely important. Well, important for how we do it in terms of our algorithms and how we can make sure the media we're buying is the right price, and then and optimizing towards it from that. those are the reasons why we started, and the reasons why we've continued to invest in it is obviously is the customization piece. It really is. So we don't go out there and say we're different because we have tech. We go out there because our differentiation is the fact that we say you need some customization here. What are the challenges? Let's see if we can build some tech to solve them. And that's obviously gone down quite well, and it's led us down a great path. And we've sold some great challenges, and we've worked some really good brands along the way. So it made sense just to continually reinvesting all the profits that we've made back into the technology side of the business.
And there's an argument to say kind of the cost, and it came out in the report as well, kind of the flip of the cost of building and maintaining a technology is kind of a positive and a negative for certain companies depending on what that company is, who they work for. I mean, Danny, over to you, kind of from the OMG perspective, where they haven't really gone down the owned and operated tech route. Kind of what is cost a barrier to that?
I think it absolutely is, yeah. I think you'll see it in the report as well. Like, how do you have a conversation with a client about funding a technology build at an agency level and making sure that they're part of that equation when you have maybe hundreds of clients working across your book of business? Like, it's difficult to say to them, like, here is how much a DSP is going to cost or a bid is going to cost that we're going to do for you, we're going to build for you in conjunction with someone, and you have to pay this percentage of that build. That's the hard conversation to have. To be honest, that's one of the biggest barriers, like having that conversation with clients. The second one is, clients come with preconceived ideas around what they want and what technology they want to use, and to be quite frank, that is becoming pretty much the mainstream for the industry right now. Every new pitch that an agency holding group is going to, it's commonly got the wording in the document of how are you going to work with my chosen DSP provider? How are you going to work with my chosen DMP provider? How familiar are you with this ad server in this marketplace? That's it now. That's the way that we have to operate in these pitches. So we could invest the spend to build something which might not necessarily get used, or we could invest the spend in making sure that we have the knowledge and expertise across a range of different third-party vendors to ensure that we can answer the pitches or the questions when they come in. And that's kind of where at least Omnicom's netted out. When we spot those areas, though, where, for example, DBM's got a good UI, but it's missing certain elements from the marketplace which you can't see, it just doesn't visualize them. It doesn't even put them in reports. So that's when you have to move down to the log level, data level to try and pull those insights out and make a full picture of how your campaigns are performing. That is where we are investing money and we are investing time.
And Gavin, your perspective, kind of somebody who has worked the brand side and now in your role at Jellyfish, almost from a consultative perspective with different brands, do you see that kind of the trend of them actually having their own technology relationships and the agencies having to plug into that as something as a part of a wider trend of them, talked about it earlier, moving in housing?
What I would say is that most brands are still investing a significant amount of their marketing budget into traditional media. There's very few brands who are now kind of 50-50, if not investing more into digital. So consequently, brands are, it's becoming more accountable. Digital spend's going up, so the ROI, the metrics, the benefits that come from it are becoming more significant. And if you think that most brands, if you think about their supply chain and how they actually procure the raw materials for their business, paid media will be a top 3 output. So lots of brands are now taking that kind of procurement method, supply chain method, and actually now putting that into their ad tech and actually having a seat at the table, potentially with their agency partner or alone going, actually, let's look at the runners and riders and actually decide which technology we feel comfortable in using, no different from when they go into market and potentially look at the quality of the coffee beans they're buying.
I think, Lindsay, as well, like on that, I think you mentioned it, Hugh, like defining what it was that we're talking about, if it's programmatic, like, and for the fact that the respondents are saying it's a benefit and a negative. The benefit, if the respondents haven't interpreted the information the right way, is that a third party is quite cheap. So it is a cost benefit because it is quite cheap. I suppose that's the other thing to think about. Like it does present a very unique opportunity sometimes, that it is a much easier and efficient way to work with clients when it doesn't cost as much money.
I think on that note, Carol, I want to come to you, kind of talking about, I guess, from Publicis' perspective of the technology that they have built, why they've built that, and talk about the customization piece and why having your own technology has helped you deliver that element of customization that maybe third parties can't offer.
So I think it's interesting what we're hitting upon is that there's different perspectives to transparency. So as an agency, owning your own tech gives you more transparency. I think from a client side, what we've found with a lot of our larger market is for them, transparency is having their own contract to the provider of their choice, right? And so we're kind of in this place, I would say, in the middle ground of giving them the choice, right? So we have contracts, obviously, with all major third-party platforms. We also have our own, so we can offer that as well. From a kind of custom solution standpoint, so we've been doing some work with IPON Web and building some custom technology focused on fraud. And so it does go back to log level data and how we match across different sources to create like a new subset of data that's been actually more effective in identifying all forms and different types of fraud. So I think the idea is that using custom technology to kind of like really solve specific advertiser problems, and then in many cases layering it on top of what's available today, so it still feels kind of comfortable and safe to them, but giving it a new spin.
And on kind of in response to the fraud piece, why bother? Why do that? Kind of what was the impetus for you guys to actually decide to build your own technology when there are plenty of third parties out there that can do that job for you?
Yeah. So as with any technology and industry, once you have multiple players kind of offering the same product, everyone kind of tends to find their own niche. So you have people that are better at bots and others that are like more integrated with publishers and viewability, for example. And we had a client who was just really bullish about fraud and was like, I just want the best and I don't want to waste a single dollar. And so we went down this tricky path of like, okay, well, maybe we'll overinvest and actually try multiple platforms, and find a way to actually get down to that lowest common denominator in terms of unified ID. And what we found is actually, surprisingly, that these different platforms do find different types of fraud. So it pays out.
It's one of those things as well. You don't, unless you built it yourself, it's very difficult to actually go and understand how well these third-party providers do it. So, everyone here is probably sat in a fraud pitch with a third-party provider. It's like, how do you detect fraud? Wow, can't tell you that. That's proprietary. So, it's not until you actually get your hands on it and you go, right, how would I build fraud? How do I detect a bot? How do I do all these things? You actually start to get that learning. And then that's exactly how you then become experts in your field. And that's how you're then either able to offer that to a brand who may be using their own DSP or maybe there's a contract, but at least you've got that expertise and you've built that in-house to say, when you go speak to a third-party provider on fraud, this is exactly the questions you need to ask. And that's obviously now becoming much more important. So there's the pivot, obviously, with agencies building their own tech, but there's also the pivot now of us all being consultants and making sure that brands can navigate this digital ecosystem. And without building your own tech, you're not going to be, you're just not going to have the deep insights you need to know to really understand what the third-party tech can and can't do, and how it's built and get into the weeds of it as well, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then, so I guess from that perspective, I'm interested to understand, kind of, obviously when we run the risk of talking about this kind of from a very sort of broad brushstroke perspective, when we refer to brands or the clients, I mean, there's all clients of all sorts. I mean, Dan Infectious specifically has the types of clients that are kind of more looking for a more specialist partner. They are probably more in the weeds than many other clients. You've got some clients that do not want to know, they wouldn't even have a clue what log level data is, they don't want to know anything to that level of detail, but do they need to know that, for example, your point, that we're having to use log level data to actually bring them the insight that they are asking for, and do they need educating into how you as agencies are using technology and how you're delivering for them? Danny, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think we spoke about this the other day. It's that we do have some clients who have the skill set and internal expertise to interpret log level data and understand the benefits that can give to their business. We then have a subset of clients who don't understand what that can do and why it's important to their business. And then smack back in the middle, we have a group of clients who read a lot of stuff on the internet and see a lot of LinkedIn posts and think that the word log level data needs to be inserted into every single conversation that they have. And that is where we have a problem, because that is where it's creating the workload, it's creating the trust issues. How do you tell someone about log level data if they don't know the concept of log level data? It's really difficult to get that across how important it is, versus, you know, a client's going like, well, you know, that seems too complex. And I've seen it happen. You know, it's too complex, I don't care, I'm not paying for it, just use the DSP. And it's like, okay, we can do that. Let's reel all this work we've done back in and forget about the conversation we're having about this certain area and just keep doing what you want to do. So we kind of have to service them all, and we have to go to the ones that understand it. This is why log level data is important for your business. This is the infrastructure that we're going to store it in. This is how much it costs. These are the people that you're going to have to pay for to interpret that data, visualize it, build the platforms that you need to interpret that data. For the ones in the middle, we spend a lot of time a lot of presentations just explaining the basics, the industry, what it means. Then, you know, at some point in the future, once they understand the differences between an SSP and an exchange, or the differences between bidder logic and a bidder and a DSP, then we might go down to log level data. What we tend to have is people going straight to log level data straight away, investing a hell of a lot of time in getting to that point. And the ones that, you know, there is loads of clients still who, you know, to your point on the kind of your right of this chart about outcomes, there's a lot of clients that still just want outcomes. I want to sell more tickets, I want to sell more product, I want to move the stock price of my company. And that's what they care about. And those conversations are great because there's inherently trust straight away in that conversation. So you can start to operate the way that you designed to operate. And when the client's interested and wants to know more, it's already up and running, it's already proving itself, and you can have a more honest conversation, a more transparent conversation about what's happening without the threatening kind of shadow of just basically having it all pulled away from you underneath your feet.
Gavin, are you finding a marked divide between the kinds of brands that want to have that understanding and they really want to be able to, they want to work with you to help them drive real business outcomes, versus those who want to know what every single URL was and every single CPM and drill down into the detail without really knowing what they're looking at and why they're looking at it?
I think Danny summed it up well. There's a lot of people who read a lot of stories on the internet and have almost self-educated themselves. What we're seeing through our training division's never been busier with brand teams actually coming for training to actually educate themselves on what's going on. What I would say following on from that is there are still so many brands out there who are still told by their agency groups they can't log into the demand side platform. Even before we get to buying proprietary technology, a well-known brand this week was told by a very well-known advertising holding group they can't log in to DoubleClick Bid Manager. And you know, here we are talking about building proprietary technology, putting a cherry on the cake, but the cake hasn't even been baked in many instances. So brands talk about these big words, but how can we be looking at log level data if we don't even have the fundamentals of a brand even being able to see the whitelist, maybe the sites they're appearing on? So it's about having digital maturity, and different brands, and Infectious, I've worked with you before, is you're working with a certain type of client who is normally a performance-based style client who has the in-house capabilities, whereas if I'm I dare say a generic brand who can't close the loop, who is literally just trying to move the needle there on perception, I don't need that level of sophistication. What I need to know is, are my adverts being seen? Where are they going? On what sites? At what time? And who am I targeting? We don't need to overcomplicate that, because a brand is buying TV on reach and frequency, targeting a certain subset audience. Brands understand how to buy TV is on reach and frequency.
Can I add another point to your point around clients logging into DSPs? We have that where clients don't get access, and then we have instances that I've seen where we give access and the clients have it, and either they turn stuff off by accident, which has happened very rarely, or they get access. So I've recently been for an audit where one of the key criteria for the audits was like, have you got access to your DSP? And we're like, yes, it's freely available. The clients log into here, they've been using it. We look at the change log, it's never been logged into. And the other things that have happened is we've been scored down because we haven't told the client that they have access. So they have access, they've been sent the emails, they can log in, they've never logged in, and then we've been scored down for it. Even though they've been through the training, we've taken them through the UIs. So there's a lot of emotion tied up in this. You know, a hell of a lot of emotion, which, you know, you can get a red flag on an audit because the client doesn't know that they have the access, even though they may have been told numerous times. And that's a big thing for an agency, to get scored a red flag on a transparency audit when you've done everything you possibly can, but it's still not happened. There's loads of emotion tied up in this space at the moment, certainly in this area, which just creates a hell of a lot of work for people.
But then the emotion thing is a very interesting point, because, I mean, my God, surely we're still in the stage, while there are some clients that really are kind of very, very savvy and really want to know, and they're actually good clients to work with, and they're good to have a conversation with. You know that when you're explaining this, they're getting it. But bloody hell, there are others that, too much power is literally a good thing, and giving them that access, and they literally going and scrutinising every single thing, as I said earlier, without knowing what they're looking at. From a technology perspective, should brands be allowed to have all of that access to every single thing? Is that the mark of true transparency, or should we still be able to hold some things back from them? And I don't mean hold things back in we're not being transparent way, but I don't need to know. I just don't. I don't know what it means.
We spoke about the ability to modularize or like decompartmentalize your tech. So if we're talking about like the full tech that agencies will use, the breadth of the tech that they'll use, the third parties and everything, for a brand to come in and try and understand each of those pieces, what they do, and also how much they cost, and how much therefore you're charging them to use that. We've had to do it. So we have had such a client, which was extremely advanced, had like the largest data engineering team, because they were like run massive affiliates systems, right? So they love the data, and they wanted all the data they can get their hands on. They wanted the data to run all the insights. They wanted to like do the next big thing in marketing and pull it all together. But they did want an intrinsic knowledge of how everything worked, and it was very, very difficult to explain everything. It was we're also having these transparency chats as well. So one of the reasons we built the bid as well, so we can have prime media cost and then layer our services on top of it. But what will they say is you'll say it's 10% for my technology fee, but can you unbundle that please, so that I understand exactly it is. And you go, okay, so you unbundle it, and then you unbundle it, and they realise that there's actually 20 pieces of tech that are working together here, and then they mostly go, actually, can you please just bundle that back up again? We haven't had one advertiser yet that's gone, oh brilliant, yeah, okay, I want to cherry pick this, I want to understand more about that and make a success of it. It is usually like okay, I understand there's a lot going on here, let's wrap it back up and go back. So it can be a frustrating amount of work for no benefit, either to the brand or to the agency, because it's just like, but the ability to at least compartmentalize it and then show it is important, so that people can go, this is what we've built, this is where the investment's going. But it is a bit of a fault of the brand as well. Like, brands are overeducated and they are trying to do this, but in some ways I think it would be better if they did do that, because the hardest thing to do when you are an agency building your own tech is understand what to invest in, which pieces of tech are driving revenue for my business, and what pieces of tech are actually driving the best performance for my advertiser. And if you don't try and compartmentalize that and understand where it's going, then it's difficult. That when brands are saying, do you know what, I did want transparency, but really I just want the lowest rate, can you drive it all down? It's very difficult, and especially for an agency to then figure out, right, where's my actual, where am I making this money, where should I reinvest? Should I just spend more on my media buying team, as opposed to reinvesting in some clever tech that's going to do something cool?
I agree and disagree on that, because a little bit of knowledge is king. The first question I ask the average brand who's advertising on YouTube, what's your cost of completed view? If they look at me in a blank state of mind, that's a slight concern, because I always knew, go back to my procurement kind of supply chain method. When I owned my viewability contract, my golden rule was you don't want to be in Gatwick at 8 a.m. on a Monday morning. So i.e. give me the good viewability, give me the stuff that I want. So immediately, just as soon as I owned a piece of software, a viewability contract, my viewability often would go from very low numbers to very high numbers, because no one wanted me to call them out on stage. So that brings efficiencies. So for brands, they can drive efficiencies and work in a very collaborative manner with their agency partners, but they need that base knowledge of actually knowing what stuff actually clears at. And it goes back, as I always say, back to that supply chain mechanism.
Do you think, from your experience, do you think that brands should be responsible for owning the supply chain? It should sit largely with them, and the agency should be a collaborative partner of that, but they should have no involvement in that side of things?
I think brands, their websites are their property. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of brands have realised recently there's an awful lot of tags on their websites that shouldn't be on there. So again, we kind of go back to basics, is we've got a brand talking about log level data here, Danny, but if we actually ran a tag audit on their site, there's probably numerous technology providers on their site who they haven't worked with in 7 years through a previous relationship somewhere and going down that kind of food chain. So we've got to all be very collaborative in this and drive business output.
I think, if I've kind of said this on a few different occasions, like, you know, if there really was a client who was super keen on in-housing absolutely everything, you know, not just the contract, not just, you know, setting up a buying capability, but also supply management capability and analytics capability, then, you know, I would go and work for that client. I would go and be a part of that business because it sounds pretty cool. I just don't see it.
No, yeah.
And I'd love to see it. I've got brands that I love. Gubbins knows that I love Marvel. I'd love to go and work at Marvel. They're not going to hire. You know, they're just not going to do it. Maybe Disney will in the future, but like not right now. And that's the truth. I'd love it to be a reality, but it unfortunately isn't.
No.
And to your point on, like, you know, unbundling everything, you unbundle everything. I've had occasions where we've unbundled everything. You know, we've got nothing to hide, so we give them the full access, and then we unbundle everything, and they do cherry pick. And suddenly something doesn't work because they've taken something out that they don't want, and it's really problematic. And I think it does come down to the fact that many clients sometimes, or not even clients, not the marketing guys that are looking at this, it's the procurement guys, 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
And they're just like, well, we don't need that, we don't need that, we don't need that. And we're like, okay, so we're literally just going to run a DSP here with no viewability. So no viewability, no fraud management. How are we going to do that? Well, we're paying you, so you need to go for all the URLs that we buy against every single month, every single week, you know, measure and stuff. It's like, well, that's going to cost you more money now because you're going to have to pay for the additional FTEs to cover the workload from every single day going through the exchanges that we buy and removing the fraud or unviewable inventory from there. So it's really difficult to have those conversations.
But procurement are often the bane of many agencies' lives.
Totally.
Yeah, there's no denying that. That's not news to anybody. But from that perspective, in terms of there is that constant challenge of the procurement side is the race to the bottom versus the actual marketing side and the agencies that actually want to try and deliver the value and actually deliver the outcomes that the advertiser might be looking for. Where does tech piece come into that? Like, if procurement wins out, and they often do win out in these kinds of conversations, what is the point in building your own tech if arguably they're going to say, well, this third party is a quarter of the price and we know them well, we don't really know what your tech does. Does that just then make it easier just to go, yeah, fine, we'll just stick with third party?
It does, yeah. But it's a risk that you're going to have to take on if you're going to build your own tech. But it's not new. You know,
No,
any company in the world, any startup company has taken a risk on someone wanting that piece of technology, and nothing's new, nothing's changed. It's just we're seeing that probably bubble up a little bit more in our industry. But you know, agency holding groups, like they're okay at doing certain things, but the one thing that probably not many agency groups are really good at is harnessing fantastic engineering talent, keeping it focused, keeping it engaged, having the right managerial and leadership capabilities to manage a team of engineers, because they are not a planner or buyer. You know, they're a team of people who need scrum management, they need to make sure that they communicate effectively. Slack in an agency is not something that's used every single day. Everyone's still using Outlook. You know, there's only pockets of people using Slack or, you know, instant communication tools. And to have that knowledge, you know, it's not necessarily there the whole time. We've seen in this industry really unsuccessful acquisitions of technology by big companies, you know, WPP being one of them, and a lot of them disappear after a couple of months. You know, it's really difficult for agencies to embrace that type of talent, that type of mentality, and the cost associated with it.
And talking of things, you know, talking about things like Slack and kind of those workflow tools that arguably are a fundamental part of programmatic media buying. When we talk about programmatic, we're just talking about the automation, as Brian said earlier.
Yeah.
How much of that is a fundamental part to what actually agencies can and should be building to actually help the workflow and help them manage those third-party providers they're working with more effectively? And I guess Holdco people, you obviously work with clients that are very, very tiny and also clients that are absolutely massive. So does that kind of technology, is that what's more valuable to you to actually help you manage and give those clients, no matter how much or how little they spend, the same level of service because they want the same level of service?
So I would say what's funny about this whole thing is there's a perception that because this is programmatic and it's automated, especially with the in-house trend, is that, oh, it's going to be very easy for me to take this on because it's going to be automated, it's going to do itself. Whereas having run it yourself, you realize it's actually very manual to run this automated buying. And so now you have to create automation to deal with the manual processes that have been created to buy automated media. And I think that's something that people are going to very quickly find out once you actually bring services in-house, is that it's not easy. And there are ways where you can kind of set it and forget it, but that's not going to get you the performance that you want.
No.
And you're going to want people in there all the time managing things and looking at things to log level data. And so having that level of automation customization is hugely important, especially as we roll into programmatic guaranteed and PMPs. Managing deal IDs is like a nightmare when you have thousands of rows.
It's notoriously unscalable.
So, which is ironic because the whole idea is that you're moving it to an automated fashion. So yes, there's efficiency there from targeting and scale and pricing and getting closer to the publishers, but then you've recreated a whole new problem of manual work. And so that's another thing that we've been working on is how do you build a dashboard or something like that to help manage that. So.
And Danny, I know obviously you're not that long at OMG yet, but are you seeing similar sorts of things compared to what you're also experiencing at Publicis?
Yeah. I mean, most of the time it is clients perceiving it as a push of the button thing. I think it's kind of a fallacy. Every major technology platform has like an automated bidding capability within it. VCPM algorithm or something like that. It is used, but it's not 100%. Like,
no one dare use it. They still want the human element.
Yeah, and it's scary sometimes when you see the levels of testing that an algorithm will do. Taking your CPM way above your target and maintaining it there for a couple of days is really scary when you go to a client and you go, we've tested this and it's actually not worked and we've spent quite a bit of your money here. So there's things like that which we have to deal with. So it's really difficult. I think it comes back down to the education point, which is used a lot in panels like this. Like we have to try and find a way to educate the clients to make them understand it. But it proves very difficult when procurement in the room, as we've already mentioned. I think as time's going on, I am seeing more agencies, or certainly in Omnicom at least, I've seen it since I've been there. They are tying things together a little bit more. There was once a separate analytics team, but the analytics team is now part of what they do in terms of media activation and planning. Like they're not necessarily a completely separate team running their own things. So they're bringing certain things together to give them a different perspective. And once they have that perspective, then they make a decision and then move on that and they make an investment or they change. I talked about Slack before as a communication tool internally. There is large parts of Omnicom that use Slack, but it's not the parts that, should be using it. Like in my opinion, you should be able to message anyone any day without needing to set up an email or a call or a meeting. And I think I'm probably taking it a little bit out of the conversation here, but like things like that are where we speed up. One of the exchanges that I work with at Publicis, like I basically did all my communication through Slack with them, and it was very good. But agencies are not, they're moving, but it's very difficult to move, especially when, to Gavin's point, the past 50 years have been traditional media. It's very difficult to disassociate the importance of traditional media and what it does for the business, because it is still important for agencies. And it's still very important for clients. To then say we need to invest, we need to change our talent base, we need to change the way we approach technology, we need to have investment strategies every single year on how much we're going to spend in proprietary IP or proprietary solutions. But it is happening slowly.
But then digital's built a rod for its own back a bit there, really, hasn't it? Because the more that we're able to achieve in terms of technology development and enhancement, the more we find out we can measure and the more we find out we can do, and then we're going, oh, this is cool, we can do this now. And the client's going, oh, I want that, but I want that as well. You're going, okay, let's build it, it's sorted.
Yeah.
Whereas traditional media, they've not needed to.
Yeah, I think it's whoever it was.
A rod for our own back. I don't like that term anymore.
No,
I hear this a lot
I'm sorry
now.
that I used it. I take it back.
We need to. There's a lot of these sorts of discussions we're going to. Oh yeah, I'm over measuring and every sort of thing. It's also really fucking exciting. So we've got to remember that as well. Digital transformation has caused the most amazing amount of disruption, and it's disrupting the marketing budgets and how we do marketing, how we do planning and buying in an amazing way. And the reason why the investment in this technology is happening is because it's allowed us to do this. Imagine if we were just all buying TV still. If we were just all doing TV, there's no data coming out of it. There'd be absolutely no need to talk about or build anything innovative or do anything cool. And also, when you look at people in agencies and how they're changing now, my media budgets are no longer being managed now by people coming out with social media degrees and pissing away and then I'm a planner now and I've got $1 million budget. We are now hiring people that have come out of maths, statistics, developers, engineers. When you give an engineer a marketing problem and look at how they try and solve it, it is fascinating how different that is to a media planner.
But
Do you have a social
go,
media degree?
Huh?
Do you have a social media degree?
Well, I did accounting actually. So.
Yeah, not much better.
I shouldn't really be here at all. but you know that we are built for a rod for our own back. We have, but the reason why we need to also think about the uplifting thing here and why it is exciting and why it's good. We've got a fresh blood of whole new people coming into this industry now because of this, so this is happening. Because there is digital, because there's measurement. And every single one of us is looking at the TV industry going, you're next, mate. You are next. Like, that is ridiculous industry. It's completely like, who cares about barb data? No one does. And as soon as, that happens, that's going to be interesting. So, yes, rod for our own back, but let's just also remember how exciting it's going to be when we suddenly, programmatic becomes...
But how often are you sitting down with a brand manager? If I'm a brand manager and I'm working in a 100 or 150-year-old company with a lot of legacy, you're only 10 years old, the brand manager's a millennial, how often are you sitting down with the brand managers and maybe the creative agencies? Because probably one of your biggest frustrations is you haven't got the digital assets you want to deploy all of your campaigns. Still, the first thing that goes on a media campaign is the TV advert, so someone can see that in the X Factor.
Yeah.
And that is a 22, 24, 25, 27-year-old brand manager who evidently doesn't watch TV according to all the data we read. But what's the first thing they want on their media plan and the creative agency want is a TV advert, because TV is still the most cost-efficient way to reach the consumers out there today. Regardless of what you might think as a 10-year-old company, as a brand manager in a 100-year-old company, the first thing they want to do is to have TV because it's the most cost-effective. So if you want to change that, you've got to re-educate every single brand manager out there, then re-educate every single creative agency out there who wants to make a TV advert, and then hopefully you might actually get a digital asset that you might be able to deploy as a 10-year-old company. Because the 100-year-old companies understand marketing to drive brand metrics.
Thanks for bringing it back down.
It's just reality, isn't it?
It is reality now.
Brand managers couldn't give a shit about business outcomes generally. They care about how many likes or their YouTube video, how many views a YouTube video got, how many likes they got on social media.
It's more about their spot time. Where's my TV ad going to launch?
And of course the spot time. But outside of that, I mean, then the onus shouldn't just be on the agencies, surely, to make sure that internally those departments are talking. There must be huge departmental silos that you're all experiencing all the time, and the frustrations that you get, we're talking about technology, not technology, that actually is a massive problem. It shouldn't be necessarily just on you guys to have to educate the brand managers as to what programmatic is, let alone what log level data is. So how do you help, can you help your clients in their own infrastructure try and get rid of some of those silos?
Shall I take it? Yeah.
Why not? Yeah, sure.
It's very, very, very difficult.
We can. Easy answer.
It is difficult, but it's just one brick at a time. That's pretty much how I think. That's how I'm approaching it. When a great example to give you is like an automotive advertiser right now. They are acutely aware that they are losing ground, that they're not as kind of like sexy to millennials who want to buy a car. Like, I've got friends who I've got an X5, it's like 5 litres, there's like 200 miles to gallon or something. Like, I'm like, I really don't care about that. Like, I like my Volvo that's really efficient and quite safe and quite boring. And this kind of conversation is happening in many different ways across many different brands. And ultimately what the brand has to make a decision to do is like, okay, what is our goal for the next 5 years? What do we want to do now to set ourselves up for the next 5 years? And it's weird, it doesn't really happen a lot in media and in marketing. Like, no one really sets a 5-year target. It's a yearly target or a quarterly target. So one of our advertisers said, we want to have 25% of our fleet connected cars by 2025. So if you make that as a statement, that you're going to do that in 5 years' time, 2025, whatever it wants to be, that can't happen unless you start to bring in different ways of thinking about how you're approaching marketing, how you're approaching the embracing technology, how you're thinking about data. And they are doing that slowly. And I kind of talked to this on the phone the other day, but it's kind of happening because of things like Uber and Netflix. Marketers are kind of going, how do I recreate what Dollar Shave Club did and the reason that Unilever bought them? I think actually Ip and Web have done some pretty interesting research on this already, like, the Uberization, the kind of Disney flicks, which is happening right now. Everyone's looking at what they're doing now and saying, in 5 years' time, how do we remain relevant as a brand? How do we take our 150 years of heritage that we've built as a family-owned business that's become a global phenomenon in consumer packaged goods and make sure that that is relevant in the next 5 years, 10 years' time? So that by making the statement that they want to be at that point by 2025, they have to start thinking now about, okay, well, what does that mean about our CRM databases? What does that mean about our websites? What does that mean about how we approach marketing and advertising? Do we become more targeted? Do we become more consumer focused? Do we need to make an acquisition? And by making that statement, they then have to have the talent internally to do it. Now, a brand manager, maybe necessarily right now isn't the right person that they have in their business, but maybe in 2 years' time they hire someone who has an intimate knowledge of due diligence and M&A activity across the marketplace to help them acquire certain companies in the certain sector that they want to move into, or embrace people who have engineering backgrounds, mathematic backgrounds, analytic backgrounds. I haven't yet seen that yet.
Is that where you think brand managers are going?
No, I don't.
Okay.
But
Just-
but parts of their companies may need to start to think like that. I mean, you were probably talking about Netflix as having one of the, or Uber having one of the largest engineering development teams in Europe. Like, they've spent the money, they've built it from the ground up, they do well out of it, other than last week when their stock price dropped. But
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll bounce back.
But then that kind of ties into the argument if we bring it back to the conversation around technology and moving the agency conversation and where the agency fits in the supply chain, in the service layer, beyond the business of media, into actually helping the business achieve real business outcomes. So they're no longer talking to you about CPM or talking to you about anything like that, but actually talking to you about how that has affected, making their fleet of cars, how has that affected actual car sales within a dealership, for example. How can technology from the agency side actually help kind of overlay with their existing legacy, largely infrastructures, to actually enable you guys to show the value you're adding beyond just whatever media you're buying that week?
But I think a lot of us already have this is because the brand manager also believes they know who their consumer is, and it's normally a very narrow-minded view of a particular person who has a certain colour of hair, who is a certain height, who lives in a certain town, and that's kind of passed on from generation of brand manager to the next. And whenever we're in these meetings, we talk about personas. What we've never actually done is actually take the data that's available very easily within the platforms they're buying on where there's conversions or signs of intent, and then just very rudimentarily just run that back through third-party data providers, or maybe pass that off to Amazon, who will then give you real digital insights of who that consumer is.
Sure.
Which often then changes completely that persona that's been passed down from generation to generation. Or maybe just simply they use their own data to actually ask their retail team, could you tell me what parts of Tesco's in the UK is actually selling more of my product? It just might be as simple as that. They actually start to know what their kind of towns are. So I think we've got a lot of data in our ecosystem that's just sat there that we're not analysing to push back into the brand manager to actually stress test their personas.
So are they asking you one question, or should we be telling them what questions they should be asking?
I think we're putting a cherry on the cake normally, and we're not going back to maybe baking the cake because we're going so far down the route. But we've got this very, very rich data that's almost too basic to use because the accounting people and the nuclear scientists we're now hiring want to put the cherry on the cake instead of going back to brand basics.
I think that this comes to the interesting part of where we are now, like the journey that we've been on. We've hired people from technology backgrounds to build technology for marketing, and we've made marketing people try and understand it.
How many marketing people do you have in your businest? How many people do you have who have worked?
This is what I'm saying. This is the journey that we're going on. We're going on now. So, the best quote the best quote I heard from a marketer was, just because you can use DSP doesn't make you a marketer, and it's absolutely true. But where we are getting to now is we're getting to a point where marketing and the technology is definitely converging, and people are going, right, how can I actually make use of this? How can I drive insights back to my brand to find things? Well, if you are a clever marketer, you don't use marketing to understand more about your audience. You use audience data to understand who your audience is not. So you can create new marketing messages, new products for those people that who are not your customers. That makes revenue go up. That makes everyone better. That's exactly the sorts of things that we need to be telling brands and doing the education piece. But again, you don't understand those insights, you don't understand those analytics, you don't understand those personas, you don't understand how it fits together unless you understand the technology. Hence why we are all investing in that technology, so we can understand it, so we can then become marketers, or marry it with marketing somehow in terms of like education. Don't know, come up with a new university course or something which actually makes people think about it from this part, so we can then sort of move on and make marketing what we think it should be using the data we've got.
And are there certain verticals, I hate to lump everything in together, but are there certain verticals where this is easier than others? I'm thinking, if you look at the gaming space where they are digital natives, like digital first brands largely, that they already have that technology. Is working with them easier because they do tend to hire people that probably have come from a scientific or engineering background rather than someone that has a social media or an accounting degree? Or do you actually, are they easy to work with? Are you able to have better conversations with them? Are you able to integrate your technology with their technology better? And are there things that other clients that maybe do have more of a legacy approach and kind of are these kind of massive oil tankers that are very, very hard to move and change? How can they learn? This isn't just about the agencies, right? How can those types of brands learn from the digital natives to allow themselves to actually catch up?
From where I sit, I actually find that the financial vertical is very sophisticated. I think it's more about organizations that have had a lot of data and have spent a lot of time organizing it, connecting it, using it, and I think it's the companies that are just getting into the data game where they're trying to figure out how best to do it. So I think, for me, I think the finance guys, banks, financial services, they have a very strong grasp in terms of how to close that loop and how to get the most out of the tech.
And they're probably one of the earliest verticals that actually has constantly got challenger brands against them, making them have to, I don't know about US banks, but UK banks are largely quite old structures with very little access or understanding of their data. Yeah. But there's a lot of challenger brands out there that are making them have to rethink how they their approach to customers. That's probably an interesting space to be in.
Absolutely. I use Monzo. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so much better than the normal bank. I think, there is definitely verticals, and I can hand on heart say it is much easier working with a client who is digitally native and has done the work internally to understand what it is that they need to do as a marketer to be ready for the next 5 to 10 years. It is so much more easier. And the way we kind of talk about internally is there's an elastic band in the industry, and you have the marketers at the forefront of that elastic band pulling it one way, and then you have kind of potentially some of the marketers who aren't moving as fast, and it's kind of stretching the elastic band, and the ones that won't move fast enough are going to allow it, it's going to snap, and they're going to be left behind. That is unfortunate reality of what we're dealing with. We may not have some of the big brands that we see right now existing in 10 years time or even 5 years time because they haven't embraced what they need to do. Some of that's down to the talent they have internally, the leadership they have internally. But at the same time, there's ones that are at the back of that elastic band saying, what the fuck do I need to do here? How can I do it? And can you help me? And those are great conversations. Those are where we can actually change things and make a difference, but they're quite rare.
Mm. I would also say e-commerce retailers, obviously, because they're sitting at the full loop. I will say that there's people who have a lot of data and have done that work, but then there's still the marketing aspect. To your point, is the technology is often still handcuffed by process and setup and organization, right? So, we could do a lot of things around where Netflix is managing incrementality across channels that we can't do today simply because the marketing budget is siloed, right? And so things are handled separately, and that's how it's given to us. It's got different owners, and that's how we manage it. So I think, beyond the 5-year plan, there's also what testing can we do today to educate and show that there's proof that we can actually do more if we could just break down some of the walls that we've built just
I think
out
that's
of
really
this.
valid. One of the first things I took one of the very first programmatic campaigns we ever ran in the organisation I was in was in the Infectious. And Infectious understood exactly what our business challenge, goals and objectives were. It comes back to strategic briefing. We can all be as smart as what we want, but at Jellyfish, our head of client services worked at Kimberly-Clark, our head of data worked at Morrison's, I've worked in big CPGs, and my counterpart has worked at Kingfisher Group, is we talk the language of the brands and really understand what their business objectives are. It doesn't matter how smart your nuclear scientists are pressing the buttons. You've got to brief them correctly. You've got to educate them in actually what brands want, and it all comes back to the strategic brief that then delivers the business output. We all get frustrated when brands change the KPIs, goals and objectives, but a strong strategic briefing and actually understanding what the brand's objectives are. They don't all want to build nuclear science. Lots of them just want to move the needle ever so slightly. It might be as simplistic as we want viewability above 80%. Just something as simple as that is actually a great win for brands. They don't actually want full-on attribution modelling, actually pointing out the inefficiencies in what they've just chosen to do. But we as practitioners love to go down that route. So it's got to be using software for the right reasons, but it comes back to, and again, where Infectious were very strong when we first entered Programmatic, was you understood what our needs were. we were looking to target a certain type of person, and you were able to prove back time and time again you were targeting those people on websites that mattered, and it was all common sense. And its strategic briefing is key in all of this. You know, it's important that that's done correctly.
Thanks. Can we put that on the website?
It's being filmed, so we can definitely get a direct quote for that. That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in our experience, so we obviously do work with e-commerce first, digital first brands. They're the ones that our story and what we're trying to do really resonates with most. But then we do also have John Lewis is like one of our biggest digital customers, and the reason why that relationship is great is because the person inside the digital team, the person that we work with, is just she just wants to test stuff. She actually comes from a programmatic background.
Misha.
Yeah. So and she's great to work with, and she always wants to test loads of new things, and that's because she came from a publisher background and doing programmatic. And there's going to be more and more of those people that are going to be moving brand side. You know, maybe not Marvel, but you know.
One day, Danny.
I hired Misha.
Yeah. There you go. You know, yeah. So it does also. I think it is an organisational thing, and it does depend on that. And then obviously digital first brands, and the new ones, the ones that don't do much TV or don't I want to see the metrics come out. But then there is a people thing in there as well.
Yeah,
Obviously.
absolutely. I hate to pull on your viewability point, Gavin, but if a client does come to you and say they want, all they care about is 80% viewability, is it not remiss of you as their agency to go, really? There's so much more that we could be doing for you, and that's what you're looking for. Like, would you not feel like that's kind of, we talked a lot about education, and a lot about how, you know, the technology, whether it's our own technology or third-party technology, can actually help deliver so much more, and it is delivering so much more, whether they want it or not, it is. Is it not remiss to kind of go, there's a lot more than this? Viewability should not be a core focus of any of your programmatic campaign. Are they conversations that you feel that you need to have with clients, or are there some where you have to go, okay, fine, that's what you want, we'll give it to you?
We've got to take a step back. We don't want to be siloed. It's what is your marketing goals and objectives?
Yeah.
What are you trying to achieve as a business today and within the next 5 years? Let's take that step back and really understand what your business is. From that, we can actually then understand how you're set up today. You know, lots of times as people on this panel, campaigns have been run that have performed very well, but then maybe the checkout function on that particular client's website is lacking a piece of tracking software, or there's something not there. Is you've really got to get under the hood of these clients and take that step back. And then when you understand what their needs, wants and desires are, is to present that back. So first of all, the comment might be, we want 80% viewability. Why is that? Okay, let's take that step back. What's the profit margin on this particular product? It's 4p. Okay, so 4p. Now we're going to be taking a CPM just in isolation here at 40%. At 40%, this is your VCPM. At 80%, this is your new VCPM. And then put all your other costs in. Actually, that's now cost you 2.5x more because you read something on LinkedIn that you needed 80%, but your profit margin is only 4p. So it's laddering it back, always back to business objectives.
Yeah, absolutely. We are running out of time. I do want to open questions up to the audience. Not just yet. Keep your hand down for now. But before we go to that, and I'll come to you first, Jane, I do want to kind of just get, a quick soundbite from each of you as to, based on your own experiences, kind of the ladder you've gone up in the programmatic world, in the digital world, and kind of your day-to-day operations within your business, what to you fundamentally as a business is the one thing you think that your company should be focusing on when it comes to building and owning and operating your own technology? Like, what's the core area of focus that you think is the most valuable for you as a business? Dan?
I think that the majority of our investment's going in our analytics and measurement pieces at the moment, because we've done the media buying piece actually, so that's the majority of where it's going. Proving the value of digital in the marketing mix and making brands feel more comfortable putting their money there is exactly what we want to try and solve.
So it's that one source of truth thing rather than using multiple platforms to try and measure it. Yeah. Okay, great. Carol?
So I would say it's about customization for the clients. It's really solving the marketer's problems. And I think with each of our clients, they have everyone's got a different thing going on. You know, there's key industry issues. So I think single source of truth is honestly going to be really hard for anyone to solve with walled gardens, GDPR. I mean, it's just going to be tough. But within a marketer's own organization, we've talked about today data challenges, leadership challenges, organization challenges. So I think it's looking at what their infrastructure looks like, and then what are the gaps and how do we fill that is really important. And I would also say that I think everyone's got their eye on the prize of this holy grail of machine learning, AI, automation, personalization, creative data technology, all converging, like delivering this huge, amazing thing. And we're all kind of like tasked to like get people there. But again, there's all these other factors going on that you can't control.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like, that's great, and we will continue to, that's our North Star. But in the meantime, look, what can I deliver for you tomorrow and the next day that's going to drive efficiency, effectiveness, and relevancy right now?
Absolutely. Danny?
Probably the support and development of more business outcome measurement, which sounds weird. Everyone's going to be tracking conversions, but like probably to Gavin's point, like tying it back to like, does it move the stock price for that company? Is it selling more stuff off the shelves, et cetera, et cetera? So like making that a key component of the training and development of any person within agency holding group, I think is key, because you can get quite confused in the realms of things that you should be paying attention to, like ComScore or other things. So that's the first thing, like definitely bring it back to business outcomes for the people in the agency and also the brands. Second one would probably be development of, we do need to build out a more robust and diversified way of offering programmatic to clients versus just buying. Building out analytics and measurement services, building out supply management services, building out consultancy services and implementation of technology or consultancy around strategic kind of like benefits to that business. I think those would be the two key things for me. And a weird thing, the third one I would say, which is quite a weird one, is I think one of the only ways that we're probably going to change this industry is more people who know this stuff go and work at the problem and go and work at that part of the industry. Which seeing bits and pieces like having Misha over at John Lewis is fantastic. How do we get more Mishas into brands that have a long-term future in data-driven media marketing? It's hard to part with those people if you're quite passionate about keeping them in your business, but at the same time, people will naturally do it.
Yeah. And Gavin, over to you.
Trust your inner consumer. You guys are buying products every single day. You're being influenced by advertising. So just simply trust your inner consumer. And whilst the cherry on the cake tastes very sweet, you've actually got to sow the seeds, you've got to mill the flour. It's a laddered process, and not everyone wants that full-on cake. Some people are just quite happy with a crumb.
So it's not, so we're not getting too ahead of ourselves. It's sometimes you need to go back to basics and actually sort of, as you said very eloquently earlier, kind of actually asking the right questions. If someone says they want X, Y, Z, you ask why. It's about always asking why.
So a crumb for me would be perfect. The crumb would be the equivalent of a cherry on the cake for me, because all I just need is first-party ad serving. As basic as that might be, I'm using multiple things. I just want a first-party ad serve, and for me that's good enough in laddering back to my goals, business objectives. Now, if I am a full-on e-commerce banking client, I probably do want that kind of big cherry, because it's a lot more complicated. So it's just trust your inner consumer, and whilst Misha might be in that particular brand, put yourselves in that. If I'm working in that brand today, what challenges and objectives might I be receiving? So really immerse yourself in the brand you're working with.
And from a tech perspective, do you think it's important for agencies to be looking at the kind of technology they can build or not?
Collaboration is key.
Thank you. Is anybody now craving a massive cake with a huge cherry on top of it?
Or a crumb.
Or just a crumb. Yeah. Thank you very much, guys. I now want to ask questions. Shane, do you have a question? Wow.
Thank you, Lindsay. Dan, you very succinctly described the value that you guys capture in owning your own technology in the ability to customize. And we've heard from Carol around the use case of fraud detection and prevention, which I think is a specific use case that is applicable here. What other sort of things that have you guys built or customized within the stack that have helped you, maybe two-part question, helped you win business and like that you have seen change the needle on delivering results?
So we've actually recently done a bit of exercise around this. What have we actually built which advertisers want? We've actually split them into modules now, so
Good you've done
I can explain them all now. I actually don't remember. Someone's from marketing's in the room, but no, it's apart from the DSP, we've also got the ability to be able to pull data together into one place. That's no mean feat. That's actually now a product that we can offer to people. So ETL stuff. So I want to get data from this Excel sheet from this third party, and I want to get it from that bidder, and I want to put it all together. That's a huge task in itself. Tag management, for example, like pixel loads and all that sort of stuff. Basically, client DMP stuff. And then there's like an insights piece, which comes down to the technology, but ultimately, once you've got all that stuff in the right place, then how can you actually analyze it? So Google tools, all those sorts of different things to be able to tie that together. Those are the things that we are mostly finding that advertisers either want all together as the service, or they're the ones that we can now modularize and give back to brands and say, we can train you on this stuff, or we can give you this technology for it. But it's not exhaustive. I think there's lots of different customization that the advertisers want. So we can build new things, obviously, if the client's right as well. But yeah, those are the standard off-the-shelf tech things, which I hope I've explained right.
Just following on that, so you mentioned earlier that you're using bid level data to understand the real price of the media. Are you doing? How are you doing that?
So that was one of the reasons for building our own DSP. So you can get log level impression data, which is great because it tells you lots of stuff around the user and the impression that you want. But if you don't understand the bid that you put in to win at that price, that's where we got stuck basically. So understanding the bid means that we can then do lots of different things around holdout models and different pricing structures and things. It's also how we got around all the first price stuff, which was going on last year, for example. It was a really good example of how we then were able to take that data and learn from it, and then also consult with brands, whether they're using our DSP.
Huh? SPO?
Yeah, SPO, yeah, okay, no.
Are there any more questions from anybody? Yes.
We've heard a lot about the technology you guys are all using. One thing I'm curious about, and a buzzword I haven't heard in this panel has been data science. And I'm curious with the data science practices you guys have at your agencies, where you're finding that feedback loop into your technology and where owning technology has either helped that, or you've been able to successfully work with third parties to apply your data science to drive value.
It's mostly come from, I think in the past 12 to 18 months, we've seen at least 3 of the major DSPs open up their bidder to be customized in some way, not like totally, but like they're giving you the levers to pull in changing some of the variables that specific bid logic values more or less. Those are the main areas where we see our data sciences teams. Still new for them, to be honest. It's certainly not developed or scale, but like that's where I certainly see from an Omnicom perspective. I actually saw it at Publicis as well. The data sciences teams feeding back into the technology, and that was with third-party tech, not our own tech or own tech. They were just working with DBM on their kind of structured data file inputs, or working with Trade Desk on some areas like that. And I think AppNexus, I've yet to actually use AppNexus, which sounds weird, but it's just down to the companies that I've worked at.
You've not been at WPP, so.
Yeah, I think they've divested now anyway, so we might be able to use them. AppNexus I've always been a fan of because I've heard about the customization you can do with their bidder logic, and I've just never had the chance to put any resource or time against it. But I think that's the main area, I would say, but I'm not speaking for everyone.
I mean, we did something similar with our data science team built a dynamic user value scoring model that plugged into DBM, for example, and in real time was able to, look at user propensity to purchase something, and have that inform, buy pricing and things like bid pricing and things like that. I would also say the data science teams have been really involved with audience insights, right? So modeling, segmentation, lookalikes, prospecting, things like that. So that's been something that has been tremendously useful too.
Okay, great. Any more questions? I thought I saw a hand go up somewhere over there. It was you.
Hi, my name is Ezra. I work as a group media team. I think the biggest challenge we are currently facing is all the complication of all the technologies. The clients wanted to know which technology they should be stacking on top of each other. And the solution sometimes is to simplify and come up with your own solution, which will simplify all the fees you have, coming up with one fee, but having everything, viewability, brand safety, DMP, and etc., and offering a one-stop shop for the clients. That's one of the reasons, but as you said, cost is one of the issues. You need to be able to have capability of investing in technologies, having your own contracts with all companies you might be working with. Other challenges from our perspective, it's good that clients are educated. They know what Google is, they know what they need to ask for. Sometimes it can be too extreme. An example, they may come up with a list of 4 publishers wanting to negatively target some keywords. It might be a list of 500 keywords. They may want on top of that 90% viewability on just one format, for example, which is impossible to execute. There you need to educate the client why you cannot scale the campaign, why it's quite challenging to get a 90% viewability on just one format with this 500 keywords. So it comes with its challenges, but I think we are getting to the right direction. And as Hannah said, we have brain currently in the agencies who can execute more complex campaigns. I think education is key for both sides.
I think the challenge there for brands is there's lots of technology that has a real benefit. There's also lots of technology that's been sold to brands that, quite frankly, the agencies have sold and they don't even know how to execute themselves. I've been in pitches where, you know, time after time, the same piece of software is put in front of me. And it's like, you don't even know what I actually need, but you're putting that same DMP that the previous 3 people have put in front of me. And you don't even know why I want that, you know? So I think brands are quite wary of technology being put in front of them. If it's there and it's used for the right reasons. Or can you, okay, so you've given me this DMP, can I actually meet your DMP team? Still waiting. Can you explain how you would do that systems integration? And they can't. So brands have, how many brands are you guys working with today? And they've got these DMPs and they can't even use them. And we're all nodding, but you've all sold the brands that DMP, but they can't, but no one can use them. So it's technology for the right reasons.
Not necessarily though.
Sometimes they buy them themselves
Exactly.
and they don't ever think about how to implement them. I mean, that's the more common thing.
Yeah.
Like,
How many of you work with clients that have bought their own DMPs? One team has been responsible for doing so. They've not consulted anybody else in the company.
Yeah.
Especially the people that will actually be using it.
Yeah.
And they're paying tens of thousands of pounds a month on a DMP that no one has to use. That, I think, is probably, from the conversations I have, much more common. It's not always the agency's fault.
I'm not saying that. But someone somewhere has sold a piece of software.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Someone somewhere has got this software.
We can blame the DMP vendors for that. Are there any more questions before we close off and then everyone can start chatting and having drinks? Yes.
Just about your point about 5-year ambitions, what do you think should be the 5-year ambition for a programmatic media agency?
To probably kill programmatic. Because there's not, I'm kind of thinking about it right now, like why even call it programmatic anymore? Like if say we get to a point where we're 50-50, let's say we get to a point where we're 75, like let's just call it buying.
Just call it digital,
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a piss poor answer for you, really. But like honestly, that's probably one of the things that many people should think about.
I think it's a good ambition because programmatic doesn't really mean very much anymore.
No, but people want it on their titles.
Of course.
Let's be clear about
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
TV's my one. TV's going to change. Like the shift, just like the shift from newspapers to digital took too long. The shift from media buying TVs down to streaming, it's going to take too long. But Netflix going advertising next year, that's just going to change the whole dial, I think, and everyone's just going to go, right, how can I do this properly, and how can I measure, and how can I, get the right formats. That's got to be the 5-year goal for me. It'll take a lot of time, but I think it's, it could take 5 years.
Exactly. We're all thinking it. Carol, 5-year goal?
I mean, I agree with you about programmatic flipping to become the core of what we do. I completely agree with you about TV as well. I think there's actually, you know, a glut of new TV inventory out in programmatic now that people aren't even accessing through, you know, connected TV and different other supply sources that, you know, we haven't even thought of in many cases. I think in-houses might come and go, perhaps. I think, but I think the idea of like holistic buying needs to. I hope that we can get there in 5 years, where we're not allocating necessarily by channel. We're not allocating necessarily by brand versus performance marketing. Like it's got to be really about the consumer and where they are in that moment in time.
So get rid of channel lines on media plans.
It's aggressive, but you know, we all talk about audience-based buying. Well, you have to start somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Gavin?
Yeah, consumer-first approach.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Awesome. Any more questions before we close off? No? Great. I want to say thank you so much to my panelists, Dan, Carol, Danny and Gavin.